That's for sure. Let's move on over to NASCAR. Thank you for filling in for Steve with us today. They're at the Auto Club out in California. That's Jimmy Johnson's home track, and this is his farewell tour. So let's start with Jimmy Johnson, the career of Jimmy Johnson, and what the impact this race means to him.
Well, obviously, it's the place where he won his first race in 2002, so obviously it has some sentimental value. But I'd say right now he needs to get his act together because he's been disappointing and somewhat off the radar the first two races. I think if you're looking for a guy in the Hendrick camp that's a challenger this weekend, based on the practice times, Alex Bowman was fastest in practice 1 and 2 yesterday. He's probably the favorite to win the pole today. So if you're looking for a candidate possibly to win his second career race to go along with his win last year at Chicagoland, Alex Bowman's name certainly is high on the list at this point.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about Ryan Newman. It's so very thankful that he survived that horrific accident out in Daytona. No clear timeline of when he's going to get back in the race car. Seems to be walking around and talking, and he was back at the shop this week. And, I think there was a head injury. They haven't really disclosed what all that was. Maybe it was a concussion, but he's being treated for that. So there's some time that has to go before he gets back in the car. But certainly a great feel-good story of what could have happened, and how thankful was that for Ryan Newman.
Well, for head injuries, thankfully, we weren't talking like what we had with Darlington and 90 with Neil Bonnet, or obviously Pocono and 88 with Bobby Allison, where amnesia comes in and to the point where Bobby Allison still doesn't remember most of the things from his history, even in his late age. I mean, he's had that issue for years, and Neil Bonnet had injuries that kept him out for 3 years. And then, of course, unfortunately, he had the fatal crash at Daytona in 94. But, I'd say based on that, I think we need to be in with a word of caution here before we're, hustling Ryan Newman back into a race car. Just to make sure everything clears up and everything's positive on that scenario before he gets behind the wheel, not just for his safety, but for the safety of the other drivers that are going to be racing around him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you brought that up as far as the Daytona death back in 1994. I was watching while we were on a rain delay with that. I was watching a special about that on Fox Sports. It is the Xfinity race today, obviously out in Fontana, California, the Auto Club. It's just me. It's just my brain. But when I think the Auto Club, I think of that track up in Wisconsin. I don't know why I always go there with my brain. As soon as I hear the Auto Club, I think about that track up in Wisconsin. But let's talk a little bit about the Xfinity Series. Chase Briscoe, Noah Gragson, Harrison Burton, Michael Annett, Brandon Jones, Austin Cedric, Ryan Segg, Justin Haley, and Justin Allgaier, and Brandon Brown rounding out the top 10 standing as we go into this week's Xfinity race this afternoon at 4 o'clock.
Well, if you're looking for candidates for the future, I'd say, Cup rides, I'd say Austin Cindric is on the list, not just because he's the son of Tim Cindric, who's the general manager of Team Penske, but I think he's shown the most potential. You look at some of these other guys that have been career Xfinity drivers. Ryan Sieg, I don't see him going anywhere. Brandon Brown, I still think is raw. Justin Allgaier, Michael Annett have had their turns at Cup racing. They're kind of, I think, stuck at the Xfinity level probably for the rest of the way. Noah Gragson could be the future possibility. I mean, a lot of people have been dubbing him as another future potential Cup prospect, but I haven't seen it yet, to be honest with you. So I think you look at the situations, Briscoe, another guy at the Ford camp, possibly, maybe a future Ross Fenway driver. But I'd say of those guys right now in the top 10 of the championship, if you're looking for a future put it on, Cindric would be the one on at the top of my list at this point.
We're talking with Matthew Embury of WSBT up in South Bend, our official IndyCar contributor, also helping us fill in for the NASCAR segment. We're going to get into some March Madness here in just a minute, but let's talk a little bit about the Cup qualifying today. We talked about Jimmy Johnson. It would be great for him to have a great starting position. But as we look at the qualifying today and we look at the standings for the NASCAR Cup Series or the Ryan Blaney, Joey Logano, Kevin Harvick, Kyle Larson, Ricky Steinhaus, Chase Elliott, Austin Dillon, Chris Buescher, Denny Hamlin, and Matthew DiBenedetto round out the top 10 as we go into qualifying today.
Now, keep in mind, even though Hamlin's ninth, he already has a win, so he's already advanced into the chase for the championship already. So he's already secured there, as was the man, Joey Logano, that won in Las Vegas. Wouldn't be surprised if one of those two wins, but I'd say, again, if you're looking for someone to add their name to the list, I'd say Blaney's a decent possibility. And like I said, if he could back up what he did in practice over, a fuel stint, I'd say Alex Bowman, would be the other one that I'd be saying for. As much as I'd like to see Jimmy Johnson close out his account at Auto Club Speedway with a win, I just don't see it happening with his performances recently in the last several events and over the course of the last year.
Let's talk about Fontana. Fontana, California is depending on traffic in L.A., anywhere between an hour and 3 hour drive from L.A. It is a track that's got kind of different terrains and different climates, if you will, within the track. And so what happens with that, you're going to see, for example, in qualifying today, you're going to see a much hotter track than what you're going to see in the race today, in multiple degrees difference as far as that goes. So it's kind of a combination of desert and mountain climates together. That it's also a very fast track, a very wide track. So you're going to see, at times, you're going to see four wide racing. This is going to be a fast track, and because of the way the temperatures and the climates, it's almost like it's in two different climates out there in California. This is going to be really hard on crew chiefs and tires, and we're going to be seeing these restarts that could end up in melee because they're going to go four wide in these restarts out at Fontana.
And unlike Michigan, where the track temperature and the grip's a little more consistent, plus the extra banking, it's going to be a lot tougher to maintain the 3 and 4 wide running. So I think you're going to see handling become much more of a factor as opposed to, say, at Michigan. And I'd say it's going to calm down really quickly. Otherwise, like you said, we could be talking a lot of yellows today with guys just being too brave. A la the last IndyCar race we had there a few years ago. The track just, even though, it's got the whip, it just doesn't have the grip because of all the excessive heat to allow for consistent 3 and 4 wide racing.
We're talking with Matthew Embury, WSPTF of South Bend, our official IndyCar contributor. Thank you, Matthew, for giving us your annual Indy 500 Grid-a-tolgy. We're looking forward to the Indianapolis 500. It's the highlight of our year, Christmas, if you will, and also filling in, of course, for the NASCAR. But we know that, hey, you're also a college. You're kind of a man of all hats, a jack of all trades. You're our Swiss Army knife. So we are beginning our conversation about March Madness. Can't wait for the March Madness bracket. We'll also get this up when we have the brackets available. But if you want a bracket, direct messages on Twitter. We'll get one out to you, Matthew, as well, or social media on Facebook, and let us know, and we'll get you in a bracket, if you will, out there for you. You can do a maximum of 2 brackets as free, and it's just for bragging rights. But I fill out a lot of brackets. Some of them are paid, some of them aren't. But I'm bound to win something. So let's talk a little bit. Let's walk through this a little bit. We'll start over in the West, which actually starts in the East. I mean, it's backwards. New York City, Los Angeles, whatever. But so we'll start out in the Los Angeles bracket. I call it the West bracket, but it starts out in Spokane. But it's going to be on the east side of your bracket there. I'm looking at this as a Cinderella team. I was just talking to Mo about this. Gonzaga obviously going to be the number 1 seed. So you look at who goes in there to play Gonzaga. Now, I think we're going to see a Cinderella develop in the first round. And we see bracket busters every year. Bracket buster alert. And my first bracket buster alert predict
Lunardi's list, or are you going with Jerry Palm's list?
I'm going with Tom's list.
Okay. Just making sure.
There might be a combination thereof. Obviously, there's a wealth of knowledge out there when you're doing your research. But I like Gonzaga being the number 1 out there. but South Dakota State I like. And if you want to dig deep for another Loyola or another Cinderella team to go deep into the bracket, I like South Dakota State. I might be eating crow here, and I might be the first one to say, hey, well, you know what? I was wrong. But I think South Dakota State is our first bracket buster against Gonzaga.
South Dakota State has had their chances, and they haven't been able to pocket them. And this Jackrabbit team is not the strong team that it was as far as sharpshooting a few years ago. So I don't like their chances. I think, for instance, Lunardi has them against Dayton, even though Dayton, you know, a marginal 2, maybe a 1, but question marks about just how good this Dayton team really is against major competition. So I'd say if you're looking for, you know, an upset team on those low lines, I'd say one team to maybe look at is the Wright State Raiders. Little Rock might be a threat. A team like Bowling Green from a MAC conference that's looked very competitive. And
well, they're going to have to get past probably. I'm sorry. I would think, and again, we don't have a seeding yet. We're just guessing here. But wouldn't they play Duke, Bowling Green, in the first round?
They play Kentucky, but again, Kentucky is a mixed bag, and I'd say Kentucky probably is not going to be a 3 seed by the time we get through the conference tournaments. I'd say they probably are more likely going to be on the 2 line.
Are you a number 9 seed?
I'm not so sure IU's even going to get in. I really, and like I said on that, I think if you're putting them in, you're slapping Jim Boeheim and Syracuse in the face from a few years ago, because they did not get in the tournament with essentially the same resume that Indiana has. So if Indiana does get in that large, I would have a major problem with them getting into this field, because especially considering Syracuse had a carbon copy resume of what Indiana has, and they did not get in a few years ago. I'd say that's a real slap in the face for them if a team like Indiana gets an at-large bid for this tournament.
Well, the loss to Purdue didn't help things at all, and they've kind of had a sloppy season. I don't know what's going on with IU. I was talking a little bit about this with Mo earlier.
The problem with IU is they have no major wins away from Assembly Hall. That's the same problem Purdue has. They have no major wins outside of Mackey Arena either. So I'm sorry, but I just see a quality win outside of home court, and I think that means something. If you can't win away from your home court, you're not that good of a team, because you don't have any home games in the NCAA tournament.
So in the first round, keeping with the home card, I got Butler playing out there in Tampa against Utah State in the first round. I think that's a good matchup, but Butler – pardon me?
A very scary game for Butler, especially Utah State is one of those teams that's got a lot of wins and can shoot the lights out. Butler has been backing their way into this tournament. They have looked horrendous the last few weeks. If they come out flat, a team like a Utah State or even an East Tennessee State or a Liberty or a Stephen F. Austin, if they get that high, I would not be surprised if Butler gets knocked out by one of those teams.
Do we got bear hugs throughout the entire month of March all the way to the Final Four?
Well, right
with
now,
Baylor?
I'd say no. I don't think it's Baylor. I think Kansas is the heavy favorite right now. They convincingly beat Baylor at Waco. I think they're going to convincingly beat them again in the Big 12 tournament. I'd say at this point, it's Kansas's tournament to lose, and I'd say if one team could possibly stop them, it's a big if. I would say maybe Maryland, but beyond that, I'd say Kansas is the heavy favorite right now.
The team that's kind of just been inching away, been flying underneath the radar over the last couple of years, starting to make some waves. In my first round, I got them playing Louisville, and that's Vermont. I think Vermont can beat Louisville in the first round.
Well, Vermont's had their moments for sure, and like we say, Louisville is trending downward right now. But again, you look at that 13 line, there's a lot of dangerous teams there. Even a team like a North Texas and New Mexico State, a Stephen F. Austin, even a team like a Yale is capable of possibly pull off an upset, or even a Liberty, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, there are some dangerous teams. Northern Iowa, remember what they did a few years ago, when they had Ali Farokhmanesh and knocked out number 1 seed Kansas a few years ago. So there are several teams on this list that have a history of pulling off upsets. And I would say if you are filling out a bracket, tread cautiously with some of these 4, 5, 4,